Hello. A little late today, guys. Sorry about that. But here we are. And I'm picking up from last week, and we were talking about AntScan and how you can get free high quality scans of ants from AntScan. And I'm going to show you my process for cleaning up the data in ZBrush and preparing it for whether you want to do rendering or animation or whatever. And so let's take a quick detour and just to show you a few things. First thing I want to note is that I'm working on a new page on my website that has an archive of all my previous live streams in order. I'm still adding to this because they go back a few years, but if you want to go back and see some of the projects I've done over the past couple years in order, this is much easier and more organized than trying to dig around through the Max on ZBrush YouTube channel. So here's all the links for you, including the link to last week's project, the beginning of AntScan. So there's that. And then let's take a look at AntScan. So what is AntScan? So this was just big paper in the New York Times. Of course, I didn't show this. So let me show this real quick. Sorry. I got a little bit behind today, so my brain is scrambled. This is my archive. Here is a link to my YouTube channel. So these are all my YouTube videos that I've been working on. And then if you want links to all the previous live streams that I've done through Maxon's live stream channel, these are all the projects in order, and these are a lot easier to, it's more organized than digging around in the YouTube channel archive. So if you want to go back and see some of the other insect projects I've done, some of them are unfinished and some of them are finished. So, and I'll be adding more to them as I go along. Okay, so there's that. And then if we want to take a look again at AntScan, so there was an article in the New York Times recently about the AntScan project. So some scientists have been using very sophisticated technology to scan insects, and they're very high quality scans. So they're much higher quality than you get from like just plain photogrammetry or Gaussian scattering, any of that kind of stuff. You can find out more about the project, and there's also a link to Biomedsia, which is the actual software that is being used, and lots of nerdy white papers if you really want to dig into it. But it's basically micro CT scan based synchrotron system. So pretty cool. The cool thing, if you don't really want to try scanning your own ants, the whole point is that there is a library of downloadable ants. Whoops, I think I meant to go to the other page. This one right here. And so there's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ants on here. Various different species. If you're not a big fan of ants, I'm a huge fan of ants. I think they're fascinating. There are thousands and thousands of species out there, and some of them are just absolutely beautiful. Terrifying and really engaging, really fascinating topic. But as you can see, the scans are all crinkled up. This is what they look like because they're dead ants. It's hard to scan a live ant. If I go to show all, we can see, look at how many we've got here. So this is great if you're a creature sculptor and you want some inspiration, or you want to do some kit bashing. It's just taking a while for the page to load, but there's a whole bunch on here. You can download these guys, bring them into ZBrush. And as I demonstrated last week, all you need to do is download the file, go to Z Plugin, 3D Print Hub, and import the STL. So these download in STL format. So what I did last week was I just showed you how I started with the scan. So this is what the original scan looks like when I bring it in as an STL. So it's a single mesh. It's all crinkled up. It's not symmetrical, and it's got some schmutz in here. And so what I spent last week doing was cleaning this up and organizing it. So now I have, like, for instance, a folder for the head. Let's hide some of the stuff. So I have my original head scan right here as a subtool. I'll turn on the solo button. And what I'm doing is I'm making kind of a symmetrical version with subdivisions. right? And basic polygroups, and for the antenna, and for the mandibles, and so on. Sorry, this is mouth parts, this is the antenna. So that's what I spent last week doing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to continue working on cleaning this up. I think we got the thorax. This is pretty straightforward. So now it's a closed surface and polygroups, decent topology. And I think I left off at the PDL. Yeah, so let's start with that. And I'm going to switch over to this white material. It's just a little bit easier to see. So you can see right now it's an open surface. It's got these holes in it, and it's got something that sort of resembles Dynamesh topology. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to stick this in the thorax folder since it's attached to the thorax. So that's my original scan. So let's rename this. We'll call it PDL original. And working on this kind of scan data is one of the best ways to learn about insect anatomy. I always think that if you want to learn about insect anatomy, ants are a great place to start because they're limited in how furry they are, and you don't have to necessarily, if you're working on workers, sterile female workers, you don't have to worry about wings. Wings in ants only appear in the queen and on the males. And the queen is temporary. When they establish a nest, they lose their wings. They actually eat their own wings, but that's another story. Anyways, so here's a PDO. Some ants have one, some ants have two, depends on the ant. And it's basically sort of the bridge between the thorax right here and the abdomen right here. That's the PDO. Okay, so we can see looks like we have a little part missing there. Let's just see what we got here. Nope, it's there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, and let's turn on the grid, and I'm going to turn on local symmetry. I'm going to turn off dynamic symmetry for the moment, and I'm going to press W for the gizmo, and I'll click right here to center the gizmo. What I want to do first is kind of align this a little bit better with the grid, and then I'm going to use mirror and weld to make it symmetrical. And then I'll do some, and Dynamesh to close it. And then we'll do a Z remesh. Okay. So this guy, we can start by trying to rotate this a little bit. Might actually be easier to, let's see. Yeah, let's go back. Let's do this. A little spiky, and the back is bent here, so we'll just manually change that with Move Brush. The Z intensity on the Move Brush. I'm just kind of straightening it out using, let's go in the document, get rid of that gradient so it's a little bit easier to see. And we can also go into the draw palette, and on the grid, I think it's under modifiers, and bring up the frame opacity. That way it's easier to see. There we go, that's much easier. And I'm just kind of squishing this over so it's a bit more on the grid, so that when I do a mirror and weld, we don't end up with two weird spikes. And the details on this guy is a bit asymmetrical. That's something I want to keep in mind when I do the detailing, because you're generally going to simplify it and then bring the detail back. So what I might do is create a duplicate of this. Let's do this first. Yeah, let's create a duplicate, just so I can project this detail back onto our finished model and keep that asymmetrical detail going. So just make it look a little bit more symmetrical. The reason, there's several reasons why I want to make this symmetrical. One is that It's not just to make it look nicer, it's also because I want the topology to be nicer. You know, I could close this surface or Z-remesh it as is and keep that asymmetry in the detail, but then my topology would be somewhat asymmetrical, and I want to keep things nice and clean, so it's a model that's easy to rig and animate. It's kind of funny because if you look at the AntScan website and the New York Times article, they kind of give you the impression that, you know, once they do the scan, it just pops out fully realized and animated and textured and all this kind of stuff. And the reality is you actually have to do some work on it to get it to that point. As far as what the AntScan people use, I think they're using Blender, but I'm not sure. I worked with, a few years ago, I did a workshop with Thomas Vanderkamp, which was one of the lead scientists in the scanning project. And I just used some of his fly scans to kind of demonstrate this process in a workshop. So this is the same idea. Okay, so now we have that. And let's just do, oh, we don't need this right now. Let's just do a quick mirror and weld just to see what happens. So I'm going to duplicate this again. I like to have the duplicates. And then I'll do mirror and weld. So we get a little bit of a double spike right there. So what we can do is we can actually, let's do it one more time. It's copying from this side over to this side, right? This side over to this side. So I can try scooching this over. Sometimes you just have to test and see. Let's turn off dynamic symmetry, so symmetry is based on the grid. It's a little thin. It's getting a little better. That's pretty good. Cool. I'm really glad that you're enjoying this demonstration. I've done a lot of work with scan data on insects. It's always a lot of fun. You learn so much from the actual scan data, and it's actually a really useful job skill. Even if you're not working in scientific visualization, if you're doing Hollywood stuff, a lot of times you'll be editing scan data like props and that kind of stuff. This. Okay, I think what I could do is when I Dynamesh, I'll just clean that up a little bit, but I think that's pretty good. We're not losing too much volume there, and now it's symmetrical. So next step is to do Dynamesh to close this. So what I'm going to do first is, there might be some floating little bits and pieces here and there that's going to make it difficult to close the model. So I'm going to very quickly do a polygroup and get rid of anything extra pieces that I don't need. So I'll go to polygroups and I'm going to do auto groups, and this will create a new polygroup for each individual mesh. So you can see these little bits have their own polygroups. Now what I can do is I can do Control Shift on this. That hides those polygroups and just keeps this one polygroup. And then I'll go up to Geometry and do Delete Hidden, and now I just have the blue polygroup. And since I have, you know, backups of duplicates of subtools, I don't worry too much about losing stuff. So now what we can do is we can do a close holes, or we could just go ahead and Dynamesh. Either way is the message can be closed. This model is, I mean, this part of the model is not too messy, so doing just a straight up close holes is not too bad. So then we can do Dynamesh. What I'm going to do is I'll just do a Dynamesh. I'm going to bump up the resolution. Let's try 400. That gives us a result of about 18,000. So let's make it a little bit higher than 400. Let's make it 900. That gives us 94,000. It's enough to support the detail. So now we can just do a little bit of cleanup here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this material, turn on Symmetry. And I'm just inflating these really thin parts so that way when I re-Dynamesh, I don't have too many artifacts. And then this, I think, should be a solid piece right there. So just do that. Eventually we'll sculpt in the fine details and I'll go and refine these parts. So this is another area where I want to kind of do an inflation just to get any like weird folds, like this kind of stuff. If you're doing like 3D printing, those kinds of things can keep your model from being a closed volume, so you want to try and eliminate that as much as possible. I said, we're going to go up to this part right here and just kind of smooth it a little bit. And there we go. And this detail is going to be redone later on, but what I'm going to do now is let's do a Z remesh. So I'm going to control click on this undo history right here. So this stores this state in memory so I can reproject from this state onto the Z remeshed version. So the next thing I'm going to do is let's take a look at some polygroups here, so I can figure out how we're going to, I'm going to use polygroups just as a way to quickly guide the Z remesh topology. So I just did Control W just to create a polygroup for the entire mesh, and now I'm going to use the masking brush. I'm holding Control and I'll paint right here. This doesn't have to be super precise, it just has to be enough to make a decent polygroup. So I can have an edge loop going around here. I do Control W. I'm just kind of looking at places where maybe a polygroup might help to control the topology. I'm not going to get fancy with doing like Retopology brush or anything like that because it's not really necessary at this point. You just want to get a nice, what I would call like a decent sculpting topology. So I generally speaking, I'll use Dynamesh as sort of like a sketch phase when I'm just blocking it out, and then when I get to the point where I'm ready to actually detail the forms or getting close to it, I'll do a Z remesh. In this case, I'm doing a little bit earlier than I normally would, just because this is a fairly simple model. This part of the is fairly simple. And the advantage of scan data is I don't have to struggle with trying to figure out where the proportions are. When you're doing this kind of insect modeling, accurate insect modeling as opposed to just making stuff up. Some of the difficulty comes into kind of figuring out the proportions, the legs, thorax, heads, etc. Because you have to kind of rely on illustrations and photographs, and they take a lot of work to get it right. But with scan data, you get a shortcut to having that kind of issue worked out ahead of time. Whoops. So I can focus on, speeds up the whole process quite a bit. I'm just going to create another polygroup there. Okay, and I'll unhide everything. Just kind of thinking about creating polygroups that go along the seams here. So in this case, what I'll do, just to speed things up, is I'm going to, my brain stop, select lasso, I'll do this. No, just do this. Missed a spot, so I'm just going to create a new polygroup there, and then there we go. Yeah, if you're just starting out at ZBrush, I'm doing a fair amount of advanced stuff, so I would say sort of sit back and kind of absorb it and kind of see the process. because ZBrush does take a little while to get used to because it's not like any other 3D program. But I'm giving you an idea. You know, a lot of ZBrush artists will work in very different ways. So I encourage you to watch a lot of different live streams and just kind of see how different people work. Like my method is going to be very different from somebody like Paul Gabry, or some of the other artists. But they're all valid. It always depends on your goal, what you're trying to achieve with ZBrush. In this case, I'm doing a lot of organic modeling, and I'm working on insects, so I don't have to be super like uptight about topology, at least not at this stage. So I'm using a lot of Dynamesh and ZRemesh to kind of clean up this parts of the model. So now this is the Dynamesh phase, and you can tell because you see the topology is like a lot of, it's just a grid with some triangles. And the advantage of Dynamesh is that you can, you know, recalculate the surface at any point you want to. It's very good for sort of that sketchy kind of phase. And then I'm going to go down to ZRemesh, and ZRemesh is sort of the auto retopology tool. And so I created these polygroups here, these colored areas, and I'm going to go to the ZRemesh settings, and I'm going to turn on keep groups. And what this is going to do is, as it ZRemeshes, it'll create edge loops that go around the border of those polygroups. So it's going to kind of force it into a, what I would say, a semi-decent topology very quickly. I'm going to set this to half. So here's the point count right here, 91,000. Set this to half. We'll do ZRemesh, and I have symmetry turned on the x-axis so that the retopology will be symmetrical. So let's hit ZRemesh. It calculates. And so you can see there's the result. And you see how these polygroups have created an edge loop around them. This will make it easier to create UV shells. Every once in a while you might get an error, like we see there's an open missing polygon there. So what we can do is, I'm going to do another ZRemesh anyways. Let's see if that goes away, if it fixes it or not. Yep, so it just kind of fixed it. So now we're down to 17,000 points. So I'll do another ZRemesh and get it nice and low. This is a small part of the ant, so it's something like this. It's not going to win any awards, but it should be okay for sculpting. So now I have this, and I've lost all my detail, but that's okay, because the advantage of this is I can subdivide the model now. So we're 1,455 points. So I'm going to subdivide, and every time it subdivides, it quadruples the number of points. I'll get it up to, let's say, let's start with just having 1.4 million as our highest subdivision level 6. We can always do more later. And that's not a big deal, but that's a nice, decent area to be in. And so what I'm going to do is just using Inflate Brush to kind of fatten this up a little bit. And if you see on the undo history bar, we have this little gray marker. So if you remember, I control clicked there to store that state in history. And so now what I can do is I can go to Subtool, Paula Subtool, and go down here to Project, and I'm going to use Project History. I'll turn off color, and that's going to project this state, the store state, onto the current state. So I'll do Project History, and that'll bring back some of the detail. This is not the final detail, it's just getting us closer, because again, this detail is perfectly symmetrical because I stored the state when it was a symmetrical model. Eventually I'm going to make it asymmetrical like the original, because that's more interesting and more accurate. But we can say that's a decent starting place. So now we have our PDO. So let's save this. I'll save this as 6. And now we can move on to the abdomen. So let's take a look at where we're at so far. Okay, all right, wake up. Sorry, my computer's being slow. Okay, so turn off the solo button. And so we have our PDO. And we have the thorax. Let's rename this. Dynamesh. All right, that is Dynamesh, yep. So here's where we're at now. So you can see getting a nice clean model compared to our original. Now I haven't changed the pose of this stuff, and I'm probably going to keep it in this crumpled pose for a little while, just until I have all the parts kind of worked out, because I can always use the original scan in this pose as a reference. Later on, we'll untangle the legs and give it the insect equivalent of an A pose or a T pose or whatever you want to call it. So let's go down to the abdomen. So here's abdomen, turn on solo, and let's start by kind of rearranging this a little bit. I'm going to hold the Alt key and put the gizmo right at the start of the abdomen where it's connected to the rest of the model, because that's where I want to use for rotating, and we'll keep it connected. So now I'm going to rotate it like this. I'm going to hold the Alt key, click on the rotate icon, that recenters the rotate tool. And again, it's the same thing. I'm going to eyeball it and see if I can get as close to a center line as possible. There is some artistry involved in this. It's good to know, right? Haven't been replaced yet. Does it have a stinger? It looks like it has a stinger. So, ant workers are sterile females, right? So the dynamics of genders in ants is really fascinating. You essentially have the queen. The queen is not a lot of people would like to think, they name the queen, when there's queen ant, queen bee, the queen, giving the impression that the queen is somehow the brains of the operation of the nest and is ordering everything around, like you think of the Borg queen in Star Trek. That's not really accurate analogy. The queen in an ant colony or an ant nest is the reproductive. In other words, if you think of an ant nest as being a superorganism, in other words, the organism isn't the individual ants, it's the entire nest, like the Borg, then the queen, once the queen establishes the nest, it spends her entire lifetime just pumping out eggs. That's all it does. And some queen ants can live as long as 20 years, believe it or not. That's their sole job. They don't make any decisions. They've already made all the decisions they need to. So you basically have the queen ant is pumping out eggs, and these eggs become the workers. And the workers are all sterile females, and they are basically sisters, right? Now, what's really interesting, and the reason I'm talking about this, is the stinger on an ant worker is essentially what was the ovipositor. In other words, the egg depositor of the individual has evolved into a stinger, which now injects venom as it attacks other insects or wards off animals and that kind of stuff. This is a really interesting topic. Some ants have stingers, some ants don't. Some ants bite, some ants sting, some ants bite and sting, some ants don't bite or sting. Depends on the species. There's a lot of variety in there. But if you want to learn more about it, I highly recommend reading some books by E.O. Wilson, the great ant scientist. A huge inspiration in my work. Okay, so now we have this and it's sort of on the grid. Okay, so let's do a quick test. You can always just kind of quickly do a mirror and weld just to see what happens. Under modified topology, it's in the subtool palette, modified topology, mirror weld across the x-axis. The stinger is a great way to see how close it is. It's not bad. I think that's pretty good. Undo and do it again. It looks like I got lucky with that one. So I'm going to undo that, and just like I did before, I'm going to get rid of all these extra little bits that I don't need. So I'll go down here to polygroups and do auto groups, and then Control Shift click on this to hide all the unattached polygroups, and then I'll go in here and do geometry, delete hidden. Okay, so now we're left with this. Sometimes when you get a scan, there's actually internal anatomy. In this scan, it doesn't have it, but that can make things like Dynamesh and closing holes more difficult. So sometimes it requires a bit more work than what I'm showing you here. This one's pretty easy. So now that I have this, I can do, first I'm gonna make a duplicate. I like to have it back up. So we'll call this one original. The abdomen, sometimes also called the gaster in ants. I think that's more accurate, but we'll call it abdomen. Abdomen original. And then this one, we'll go down here to modify topology, mirror and weld. Now we have that. And I'm going to do a Dynamesh, so what I'm going to do is use the inflate brush to go in here, maybe just these thin parts, just like I did before. Let's turn on symmetry. I think that's okay. We'll just see how it goes. Some of the stuff, I'll just add a little bit, fatten it up just a little bit. So basically, once I get the whole model kind of blocked out and in kind of a form to start sculpting detail or poly painting, whatever I want to do on it, then I'll look online for reference for this specific species. Sometimes you can find it, sometimes you can't. Depends on how obscure it is. But I'll use that as a visual reference when I'm sculpting detail and that kind of thing. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's go into Dynamesh, and I'm going to set this to like 900, which is what I had for the other one, around 900. And do Dynamesh. That worked pretty well. So every time I control, drag, and release, it recalculates the surface. So I'm just going in here, smoothing things a little bit. The sections of the abdomen on this ant are really interesting. So these are all the overlapping pieces. Not as generic as some ants. It's got some real anatomy to it. So we're going to create different pieces for all of these things. But first, let's do this. So we kind of have a choice in how we want to do the abdomen. We could do it as one piece, just like I'm doing the other parts, like the thorax, but you can see the abdomen is actually made up of overlapping shells, right? Or overlapping sclerites. Or tergites. I forget which one they use for ants. So these are sections. So if you're going to animate this and you wanted to make it, you know, these sections kind of move somewhat independently to add a little bit more life to the model, then you could create separate geometry for each one of these pieces, which I've done before as well. And I think I'll do that for this ant, just because it's kind of more interesting than having everything as one lump. But if you're in a super big hurry and you're just doing this because you need something for an illustration or a 3D print, then you probably want to keep this as one single closed piece. So the decision to how you decide to do this, it depends on your final goal. I'm going to model this with the goal of something that I can rig and animate. I don't know if I'm going to get to that point for this model, but that's the goal. So all the techniques I'm using are targeted towards that goal. So I'm going to control click on this undo history, and I guess so. At this point, I have some choices to make. I could go ahead and do a Z remesh, and then split this into separate pieces. Or I could split this into separate pieces now when it's in this Dynamesh state, and then Z remesh each one of those pieces. I'm going to have to make some stuff up because I can't see the inside of this. I can only see that it's tucked underneath here, and it's hard to see what's going on down there. So let's take a look at our original scan. It's hard to tell exactly what's going on here. If this piece actually kind of bends in and goes in like this, or what. And this is also a little bit tough to see. We can see where this segment ends. Let's go back to the abdomen. You can see where this segment ends. That's pretty clear. But this looks more like a bulge than an actual segment. These scans are pretty accurate, so I'm going to trust my eyes and see that this is a division in the segment right here. This is a segment right here. This is a segment. We have them overlapping here. So these well-defined lines right here, I'm going to assume are the actual separation between segments. So I'm going to model this as if this is not a break in the segment, but it actually is kind of swooping up in there. Maybe it's a membrane or something like that. Some ants will have very, very flexible membranes in the abdomen. If you've ever seen like a honeypot ant, its abdomen will actually swell to this gigantic, ridiculously gigantic shape because it has kind of soft tissue, and then the tergites are on top of it. Other ants, you don't see any of that membrane between the actual segments of the abdomen. So let's just believe our eyes at this point. All right, so here is my Dynameshed abdomen. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder. I'll call this abdomen. And I'm going to duplicate this once again because you can't have too many backups, right? Have original, have this one, have this one. This is the one that we're going to split into different parts. Kind of like how I did the antenna. So let's start with the easy stuff, the most obvious stuff. And I'm keeping this in a Dynamesh state for now. So I'm going to start making polygroups. And I'll do that just by holding the Control key and painting a mask. And I have symmetry on. And if I want to erase the mask, Control and Alt. You can also decide if we want to make a different subtool for each piece of the abdomen, or we want to keep them as separate meshes within the same subtool. Don't have to make that decision just yet. Control, Control, Control. I'm going to hold Control and lower the focal shift. That'll give it a sharper edge to the masking brush. Not sure why I'm wearing headphones because I'm not listening to anything. Okay. I'm in such a habit of working with headphones on that I don't even notice it anymore. Okay, so now I'll do Control. Actually, what I want to do real quick before I do polygroups, I'll go under masking. I'm just going to hit a quick boost mask. That'll just tighten up the mask in case there's any little spots that I missed. And I'll do Control W, and now I have a polygroup for that. I'm going to Control click on this once, Control click on it again. Then now you can see I have that polygroup. I'm going to, let's redo this polygroup right here. Let's actually do, I'm going to invent something here. Let's do something like this. Do a quick boost mask. Make sure I didn't have any stray spots. I do Control W. So now I got a polygroup for that. A little edge here, so I'm going to undo that and just paint a mask right there. Control W. One more time. Just to reduce the number of stray points that I have. Okay, so there's that. And I'll do Control Shift click on this. I'm going to go to the side view. My mask. Do a boost mask. So you can see these are my polygroups so far. Control Shift click right here. Let's see. I got a stray polygroup right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and, whoops, Control Shift click on a point, and that's going to hide everything but those two polygroups. So just do a quick Control W just to make sure I don't have any teeny tiny little polygroups hanging out. And then what I'm going to do is if you're new to ZBrush, I always say that the key to mastering ZBrush is understanding masking and polygroups, because that's how you're going to really work with the meshes. You're organizing them. The more you understand how polygroups work and how masking works, the easier it'll be for pretty much all stages of ZBrush. It's not the only thing you have to master, but it's an important part of it. So I'm just kind of figuring out where I want to put this mask in terms of how far it goes in. I think that's okay. We'll do Control W. Now this is what our polygroups look like. It's not super neat at the moment, but that's okay. We're going to fix that a little bit later on. Now I'm going to Control Shift click right here, and let's make our, this is going to be a division line, or at least I'm going to assume that it is. And so I'm going to paint a mask that goes, I think, a very cool shape. Control Alt. Of course, this is nice because now we can paint on the inside. This kind of weird random stuff on the inside is it's what's going to make creating a printable object difficult, but we can eliminate that a little bit later on. making a few assumptions on how these pieces fit together. Hopefully I'm right. I have had comments before from entomologists on some of my ant models where I got like one tooth on one of the mandibles wrong for that particular species. So people who know their ants really know their ants. Okay, let's do a boost mask. Control W, now that's a polygroup. You can see I have that little blob there. So I'm going to make a polygroup for this big piece right here. Yeah, there's lots of different ways. There's lots of different masking tools and lots of different polygrouping tools. And there's even polygrouping plugins like Polygroup It. I don't use that one as much as some other people do. Polygrouping is also really, if your goal is to do hard surface modeling, it's also very useful for that. I bet this ant never thought she would be famous someday. Just a little ant gathering seeds and tearing through the flesh of other insects, and one day you're on the internet, man. It's an ant influencer. Okay, so this one's a little bit tough just because it's so close. But I think we can fix that later. Again, this phase is not about super precision. It's just trying to make things easier to work with. So we got that. This part is easier, of course. Okay, let's do a boost and Control W. So this is what our polygroups look like now. So I haven't changed the mesh at all. All I'm doing is organizing it into these colored zones, which are known as polygroups. And when next time I do a Dynamesh, I'll turn on the polygroup feature and it will Dynamesh, but it'll create a separate shell for each one of these polygroups. So that's kind of my thinking here. And this kind of stuff that's less than perfect, it's okay. We can fix that in the Dynamesh phase. So let's do this. Let's do an easy one. Do the stinger. Control W. Now that's a polygroup. I'm just kind of whittling this down. Almost done though. Control Alt to erase the mask. Control W, now that's a polygroup. This one I can use the select lasso tool and just go. You can also, if I've hidden everything but this section, I can do Control Shift X to grow by one row of polygons, and then I'll do Control W. Now that's a polygroup. These raggedy edges I'm going to fix later on anyways, so let's see. This one, I'm going to go. The masking brush I use, or the masking technique for creating polygroups I use for parts that are just a little bit too hard to get to with the select brushes. Now we do an autosave. So Okay. Control W. Control W. And this one is actually pretty easy. I'm going to do this. See this line right here? That's the division. So I'll do Control W. There's our polygroups. The only one that concerns me is this right here. We got these little bits right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to select lasso. I'll just hide these. Whoops. Control Shift drag around it. Hold the Alt key, release. That hides that. Control Shift drag. Hold the Alt key, release. That hides that. And then I'll do Control W. So this is now its own polygroups. Now I have kind of this white and green part. So what I can do is, the trick is to come in here, hold the Control and Shift key, and click on a point that's shared by both the white polygroup and the green polygroup. And now it hides everything but the white and green. So that shared point is the key. Now I can do Control W, and now this is its own polygroup. The specific colors that it's choosing don't really matter. They're chosen randomly. So so here's the result. So this is a good place to save. And after all that work, now I'm going to go into Dynamesh, Geometry, Dynamesh. I'm going to turn on groups, and now I'm going to Control, drag, and release. So it's going to re-Dynamesh the surface, but now it's going to create a different surface for each one of these parts, these polygroups. So it's already done my dividing into separate meshes for me. So, I mean, it's made these kind of solid. I don't know if let's see, that one's pretty good. I think we can fix that later if we need to. Might not really need to. But what we do need to fix is some of this this kind of stuff. Because this surface now has thickness. Before it was two-dimensional. Now you can see it has thickness to it. So I'm just going to go in here with the inflate brush and just kind of do a quick inflate to kind of close up those little holes. And just add a little bit of thickness so that when it recalculates the Dynamesh, I don't have such a ragged edge to it. Here's a good example right here where these things start to get all jaggedy. So I'm going to Control Shift click to bring everything back, and then I can do a re-Dynamesh, Control drag and release. So if you get this problem right here where things freak out, don't freak out. It's just that ZBrush is having a hard time figuring out how to calculate the volume, so it flips out. So there's a few things you can do. One thing you can do is, Control Z to undo it, and you can try lowering your Dynamesh resolution a bit. So I'll set this down to 800, Control Shift drag, and that time you can see it closed all that nastiness, but it also it's not freaking out. The other thing you can do is if you keep lowering the Dynamesh resolution, you still have that freak out. You can just go back and see, because what's going on is the geometry is all tangled up, and because of the inflate brush, some part of the geometry has gotten tangled up. So you can try and go back and smooth where it's really badly tangled, because ZBrush sees that tangled area and it's like, I don't know what to do, so it just makes this crazy surface. So you can either try lowering the resolution before you Dynamesh again, or you can go back with like inflate and smooth, find those areas that look really tangled, and just smooth and inflate and re-Dynamesh until the problem goes away, or some combination of those two techniques. I'm using a Cintiq. So let's do it again with this one. We're just going to go along this ragged edge with the inflate brush. So this is what I mean where these parts get tangled. Sometimes ZBrush is like, I don't care, and it fixes it. Sometimes it causes a real problem. But we're just trying to create a mesh that we can eventually Z-remesh and then sculpt into a nice shape with a decent topology. So that's the goal right now. So let's do this, re-Dynamesh, control, drag, and release. So that looks pretty nice. I'll just go back and smooth it real quick. And we're going to actually extend this surface as well, because in reality, this is actually a full piece that goes into and underneath this part. So we're gonna extend that, probably using Sculptris or something like that. But I just want to go in here and clean up these parts real quick before I get to that. So I'm just doing an inflate along the edges here to get any holes. If you end up doing models for 3D printing, then understanding these kinds of Dynameshing techniques come in real handy. Oh, so we have a little freak out. Let's undo that. And we'll just do a little smoothing here. You see we have these little holes right there, which is causing a problem. Yeah, that fixed it. There we go. Okay. So that part looks pretty good. How does this part? I did this part already, right? This part needs some work. Just hit it with the inflate brush. Real quick. Oh, pretty good. No more holes. These part needs some work. Okay, so here's an opportunity. We can just get rid of this altogether. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just Control Shift drag and create a new polygroup. I'm going to bring everything back by Control Shift clicking on the canvas. And I'm going to Control Shift click on this once to hide everything but this polygroup. Control Shift click on it again to invert that. And now let's double check and make sure nothing else is hidden. I'm just going to do delete hidden to get rid of that weird little piece. So we'll go in here under modify topology and do delete hidden. And now Control Shift click on this and use the inflate brush to clean up these edges. This one might give us some trouble because it's especially mangled, but we might have more geometry than we need in terms of the zero mesh. We don't have to use a really dense mesh at this point because we're going to change a lot about it. We just want to maintain that shape as much as possible. I like to clean up each one section at a time. That way, if I do have a problem when I re-Dynamesh, I can easily figure it out that it's the last thing that I worked on, as opposed to cleaning up all these different polygroups, then re-Dynameshing, having it freak out on me, and then I had to go back and try and find which part is giving me the problem. So let's try that. That actually worked pretty well. So one piece at a time. You know, it's going to ignore any of the parts that I don't change before I Dynamesh. It's going to ignore it. So it's only paying attention to those parts where I actually changed the geometry when it re-Dynameshes. So you can do it as many times as you need to and not worry about it messing up the other parts of the model and doing something you don't want it to do. So here's some really nasty geometry. So this is probably going to give me problems, but yeah, not too bad. Just smooth this out. As you can see, it's a little bit of a tedious process, but the end result is worth it. Let's do this one. Believe it or not, this is going to end up a very nice and clean piece of geometry. Oh, that one's freaking out. So do a little smoothing, a little inflating, a little smooth, a little inflate. Still a problem. Let's try lowering that geometry a little bit under Dynamesh. 700. Oops, excuse me. Nope. Okay, so we could also, this makes a good case for doing sculptors here. So let's do that. I'm going to turn on sculptors. What sculptors does is it is another form of dynamic topology. You can see right now if I have sculptors off, and I hit it with the inflate brush, it's just moving those points around, but I'm not changing the geometry other than that. If I turn sculptors on and I hit it with the inflate brush, you see how it's actually just in that area, sort of dynamically subdividing the surface. And sometimes, and also when I smooth, sometimes this is another way to eliminate those problem areas. Like if I just do, let's go crazy there. So, and then of course I like to use Sculptress and Dynamesh in tandem when doing stuff like this, because I can Sculptress all this stuff out. It might help with some of the mangling, and then re-Dynamesh, and hopefully it'll work. Let's bring this back, re-Dynamesh. Hey, there you go. See? And now I'm going to turn off sculptures for now, and then just smooth this out. With sculptures off, it's not changing the topology, it's just allowing me to smooth what I already have. So, another good tool set to learn, Dynamesh plus sculptures. That's a little bit more advanced if you're just starting on ZBrush, but it's you can see how useful it is. So I'm just going to go straight to turning sculptures on because I can tell this has a lot of sort of these pieces that are sort of floating in air, and I'm going to inflate these guys so that they're overlapping, and that way when I re-Dynamesh they'll be fused into one surface. And this part is, you know, it's such a simple part of it. The end result is going to be so simple that I can just be very quick about it because I'm going to change it a bit. I just want to get something in place first. There we go. I'm going to turn off Sculptress and just smooth that edge. Almost there. Just a few more pieces to do. Let's see. I got this to do up here, and then a couple pieces down here. plate around the edge. Just a few more seconds. Almost there. Oops. Let's undo that. Turn on sculptors. Just do a quick smooth and inflate these random little bits covered up. Oops, gotta unhide everything before Dynamesh. There we go. Turn off sculptors. The reason it's called Sculptress is there was an application called Sculptress that was made by another developer that used this kind of dynamic topology. And it was a free application. It was pretty cool. So Pixelogic, before it was Maxon, they hired the guy who made the program, and then they made it part of ZBrush. And it's a really nice and extremely useful part of ZBrush. Just gives you another way to deal with geometry. Okay, so there we go. It look right now it looks pretty terrible, but that's okay. We got a fair amount of work left to do in shaping this, but at least we're getting the geometry under control, so it's easier to work with Dynamesh and eventually ZRemesh. What I'm going to do after I clean this up is I'm going to go look at these pieces that are kind of like tiny slivers, and I'm going to extend that geometry so that I can, so that it actually goes under there, actually overlapping as separate pieces of geometry. And so if it's rigged and animated, I want those pieces to actually slide, because that'll make it much more realistic. Yeah, the first time that the geometry freaks out when you're trying to Dynamesh, it can be very disconcerting until you kind of understand what's going on, and then it's just like, you're just at that point, you're ZBrush's therapist. You're saying, ZBrush, just calm down, man. We can work through this together. We'll figure it all out. It's all cool, man. Okay, let's do a Dynamesh, and there we go. And I think that's all the pieces. I'm not seeing any raggedy edges. Doesn't look great, but it's definitely better. So now let's save this. If ZBrush was a person, ZBrush would be your crazy uncle. Or your crazy neighbor. ZBrush is the Kramer of 3D software. Hey man, it's not the quantity of viewers, it's the quality of viewers, okay? That's called pandering, by the way. So, now, what to do? I'm actually going to lower the resolution a bit more. Did that actually work? Yeah, it just looked ugly for a second. And let's figure out what's overlapping. Okay, this piece, I can turn off line for now. This piece right here, I think this piece is pretty much good to go. Don't need to do anything to it as of yet. And this piece, we'll have to do a little tucking and that kind of stuff, but I think it's okay. This piece, how it joins up with this, I'm not sure. I kind of did a little bit of invention here, so I might have to fix that later. But this is more obvious. This piece obviously has to be extended, so it slides underneath this one. And we could always bring it forward a little bit more. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let's mask this. Just this edge. It's got a right masking tool. Okay, I'm going to invert that mask and turn on. Now, of course, I don't have these as separate subtools, so if I unhide everything, oh, actually what I can do is I'm going to go down to brush, and I'm going to go into auto masking, and I'm going to turn on mask by polygroups and bring this all the way up. So what this means is, since these are separate polygroups, the brush is only going to affect the polygroup that I touch. So what I can do now is I'm just going to drag this underneath and just extend it. You could also use inflate, but I'm just going to drag this for now. And again, once we get a Z remesh, we can clean it up some more. Z remesh can clean it up some more. How far am I going to drag this? I don't know. Just probably more, as much as possible, just so I can get some depth here. Do you have a link? Is your work in progress online? Is it something you can see an image of? I don't know if you can paste links. Oh, there we go. Okay, let's take a look here. I can take a break for a second. Oof. Okay. All right, so this is your work in progress. Okay, this is cool. We got this demon type deal. So is this something? What's your goal with this project? Is this something you just want to do as a render, or like a 3D print, or what's your feeling on this? I think it's pretty cool so far. I like the pose. I would say if I was the sculptor, okay, 3D printing, okay, cool. Well, this will make a really nice 3D print. And so if I was John Brown, the sculpting teacher that I learned from at Noman, what I would say is be careful of your plumb line. Looking from the back here, this guy is so far tilted over, it's like he's off balance, which is going to make him look a little bit weaker. I mean, this guy obviously is somebody you want to look really strong, right? So I would say maybe you could, a couple things, you could keep his lower torso the way it is and bend him at the waist, get a little contrapposta linguine type thing going here, so that you have a nice kind of motion here between this. You might want to think about the whole composition as being like an S-curve, which you almost have, so if you like lean this guy over right here on this axis, I think that might help to make him look a bit more stable. Otherwise he looked like he can come and kick him over. I had a friend who every time I did any kind of concept work, he'd just pick it apart in terms of the vulnerability. So if I had a robot with a lot of wires, he'd be like, well, just come up and cut the wires. Your robot's dead then. I'm like, thanks, man. I thought the wires looked cool. So you want to kind of think in terms of the strength. This right here is a cool design element, but we're all going to see that as his wiener. So I would think about maybe, unless that's what you want, think about how you can affect this design a little bit so it doesn't, because that silhouette right there, that's where everybody's brain is going to go. Well, at least guys, they're going to see that as his genitals. I would say, technically, it looks really solid. I think it's going in a nice direction. Oh, it's missing a hip cloth part. Okay, yeah, I think the hip cloth. Then in that case, then I think it'll look cool. Yeah, I mean, otherwise, I think it's a cool design. It looks like you're just starting to get into sort of detailing parts of it. So, I would say, I know you're working on the head. When you get back to detailing it, exaggerate some of those details, push and pull, because as you know, in the 3D print, especially, it's going to lose some of that definition in the 3D print. So you want to kind of like, in the cavities, push them in a little bit more, and the other parts pull them out, so it looks really obvious, But I think it looks pretty cool, man. If you could find out when Tomas Wittelsbach is live streaming, he's really good at doing critiques. He'll actually take your model into ZBrush and examine it. Cool. Keep me up to date, on the live streams and the progress, Okay, so let's see. Control Shift click on there. I'm going to, whoops. Okay, if auto masking is turned on, then Sculptris won't work. So let's do this. Let's clear the mask real quick. Switch. Okay, yeah, all right. Turn off mask by polygroup. Turn off Sculptris. Okay, just get rid of that notification. Okay, so let's just continue with this. I'm just going to pull this back as much as I think is necessary. And this part's going to be hidden. And like I say, if we rig it and animate it, we want to have enough geometry so that we don't have any gaps. Insects are very concerned about keeping moisture out of their interior of their bodies, their exoskeleton. So that's why you have a lot of tight overlapping pieces. So I'm really excited. I haven't done an ant in a really long time, so I'm excited to have a new ant for my library. I haven't gone in and counted how many insect models I have, but I have a lot of them. One of these days, I might actually set them up and sell them on Fab or something. Just haven't had time to. A lot of prep work in getting something like that available to sell. Also, there's a lot of ant models I've done for clients that I won't sell because of my contract with the clients. Okay, so I'll just do a Dynamesh there. Okay, so we got a little bit poking through. That's no problem. Okay, so we got that. So now let's do this. Let's take this one. And in this case, I'm going to use inflate. I'm going to inflate this interior border. So what I might want to do is I might want to work on this as a separate subtool. That way I can look at the rest of it with transparency on. So I can always, separate into subtools and then remerge back into a single subtool if I need to later on. That's no problem. So what I'm going to do is I like to go down here and to separate this. So I have these parts hidden. So I'm going to Control Shift click on this so everything else is hidden. And then below the subtool palette, right here under split, there's split hidden. And that's just going to make a new subtool from the hidden parts. So now I have this, and I have this. So now what I can do is turn on transparency, turn off solo, and what else we got? Let's turn off these folders right here. And that'll make things easier because now I can kind of see what's going on here. I don't really need my headphones right now. It's like a security blanket or something. I don't know enough about this ant species to say exactly what's going on right here, so I'm going to use a little bit of guesswork. But my guess is that it's overlapping. I'm going to re-Dynamesh the surface and smooth that out. The other thing I want to do, I'll turn on the solo button, is I'd like to have this be a bit thinner. Instead of having this all this meat inside. Whoops. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to inflate this to make it a bit thicker right here. But I'm going to get rid of some of this geometry in here. You could use a Boolean to do this, but there's a faster way. If you're in Dynamesh mode, there's kind of an old school method where I'm going to, let's turn on double-sided under visibility, display properties, double, okay, so it's on already. So I'm going to go in here and find my insert primitives, select a sphere, and I'm going to hold the Alt key and drag. So I'm holding the Alt key, which is going to make this into a negative sphere. So you can see when I put it in there, it masked the rest of the surface. So now I could just move this and stretch it and squash it and use the good old move brush. Push up here. So normally when you use the insert mesh brush in Dynamesh mode, when you read Dynamesh, it's going to fuse those surfaces together. But since I held the Alt key when I added this sphere, it's going to use the sphere as a subtraction. So I do Control drag once to clear the mask, and then again, and you can see now it's kind of, not only has it eliminated that geometry on the inside, it's left a polygroup here, which is also handy because I can Control click on this to hide everything that polygroup. Just move this up just a little bit to even thin it out even some more. Let's see, don't want to go beyond that. Control drag once to clear the mask, and again, I think I moved it up too much. So I have intersection geometry. So let's go back a few steps. I don't know why it's doing that. Shouldn't be doing that. Let's go back a few steps. Control drag once, clear the mask, and again. There we go. Smooth this. Yeah, okay, it was just a weird bug. A weird bug on an ant. Go figure. Okay, that's good enough. I'll just leave that polygroup there so we Z remesh it, it'll be in place. So I'm just going to leave this as a separate subtool for now. In fact, what we can do is let's just go ahead and Z remesh it. So I'm going to, let's control click on this history state to store this in history. Let's also save this because ZBrush likes to crash when you do things like this. So now I'll turn on line mode and go under geometry, Z remesh. I'm going to keep groups, not freeze groups, keep groups. Turn on half, get rid of adaptive, and just Z remesh this. And do it again. I'm going to get it nice and low, as low as we can get without too much distortion. That is 2,000 points. That's pretty good. We can always try a little bit lower. Yeah, let's make it super low. Okay, so now we have this, and now I can do Control D to subdivide, get it up there, do subtool, project history, a little bit of smoothing here. Let's increase the projection to 0.04. And then subdivide, project history. And subdivide again, and project history. That's probably good for now. I'm gonna do something real quick. I'm gonna go into preferences and turn on config and enable customize. I'm gonna get rid of some of these. These are just for a demonstration. I'm gonna get rid of these brushes and go into the brush menu. Hold Control Alt and drag my mask by polygroups down here, and I'll do preferences, turn off enable customize, and store config. That way I have this down here and it's easier to get to. And it's okay. That's good enough for now. But you can kind of see where we're going with the rest of these pieces. So I'm going to save this. And let's take a look. Down here is where we're going to have a lot of issues in terms of overlap. So I'm going to Control Shift click on this, just hide these to make things a little bit easier to deal with. And now what I can do is, since I now turn that mask by polygroups all the way up, so that way I can use the move brush, and we want to have this overlapping this, right? So that mask by polygroups, it's pretty easy to come in here and drag this, just extend it. I'm not going to get worked up, you know, I don't want to change the shape too much, but if things get a little out of whack, it's okay, because I do have that original scan data plus plenty of backup subtools that can help me shift things back if I need to, if I move something in too much or something like that. I'm just going to move this back. hard to see. And after we do the Z-mesh, then I'll be able to refine this stuff and make it look a little bit less like dough. Play-Doh, man. So what I want to do, let's save this. I want to take a quick look at our original here, just to see how these pieces actually overlap. So you can see, okay, so this is one I want to pay attention to. You see how this is tucked under here, and this is tucked under here, and this is tucked under both this and this. This is tucked under here. So what I'm going to do is, as I'm shaping this stuff, I don't want to lose sight of what's going on there. Let's see, I have another version of the abdomen here. Yeah, this one right here. So I'm going to move this over to the side of the screen here. I'm going to use this as a visual guide. And the way I'm going to do that is, let's put it like this. Let's see, as long as it's clear. That's pretty clear. I'll just move it over here. And I'm going to press Shift S. And what that does is it drops a copy to the canvas. This is no longer a 3D model. This is ZBrush's pixels. In other words, pixels with Z depth information. But this is my 3D model right here. So now if I go back down to this part, I can keep track of how it's supposed to look as I move these Dynamesh doughy pieces, doughy blobs around, so I can match this a little bit better. So that's a kind of a nice little feature to remember from the old days of 2.5D sculpting. Can be useful to just drop something to the canvas and use it as a 3D reference. That also is helpful if you're working on something, one side that you can't see, or something like that, So just getting this in the ballpark, and then when we Z-remesh, I'll make these nice and thin. But I also want to have that curve right here. That's better. And then this goes up into here. And then that's this part. This is this part. I'm going to keep track of what we're doing here. So it's going to be tucked under the yellow. Let's do this. Whoops. Unfortunately colored both of these blue, so it's a little bit hard to tell, but something like this. So this mask by polygroups right here is making my life a lot easier, because now I can just, as long as I'm paying attention to what I'm touching when I'm moving things around with the move and smooth brush, then it saves a lot of trouble, because I don't have to go and manually mask parts or hide them and all that kind of stuff. You could also use the topology brush, but the move topological brush. The move topological brush has a limitation that every time you touch the model, it's looking at all the points that are connected. So if your model has a lot of geometry on it, it can make the interaction really smooth, really slow. So that's why I like to use mask by polygroups more than the move topological brush. If you have a really low poly model, the move topological brush is nice because then you had to worry about making all the polygroups. So if you're in a rush, that can be helpful too. So that's this piece. Yeah, it's going in there. It's going into there. This ant's pretty easy in terms of keeping track of the overlapping parts of the abdomen. Some other insects could be a bit more complicated, like bees can be a little bit tougher because it starts to mess with your head because there's more pieces that are exposed, and getting the overlap in the right way starts to become like an interesting puzzle. Little brain teaser. But, you know, if you're like into making robots and that kind of stuff, looking at the way that the parts of an insect fit together is a really great inspiration. So I'm going to push this in and then tuck it underneath. Like this. Comes up. Oof, I'm going to stretch my hand. This is all the, you know, this part, all this preparation, you know, the fun part is making the detail. That's where things get really exciting. But we had to, the more we prep the model and make it nice and organized and everything, good topology or decent topology or whatever, the easier the detailing phase is going to be, and the more fun it will be because we'll have a lot of our work done for us. If I just get into heavy detailing right away, then it's a mess. That's why I don't spend a lot of time doing detailing when I'm in a Dynamesh phase, because it's not a good use of time. See how it looks. And again, we'll make this all nice and neat once we Z-remesh it. If you're using the Alt key, if you're using the move brush, when you hold the Alt key, that'll move based on the normal. So you can see every once in a while I'll do that to kind of pull it in. I'll hold the Alt key and drag like that. So that's looking better. I think let's double check. Yeah, this is going in like that. I got a little part where the stinger comes out. Fan this up a little bit. And then we have this part going in like that. This part going in like that. The yellow part like that. So that all looks good. Let's pull the yellow part back a little bit. Pull this part back a little bit. So this tucked well underneath the larger tergites. A little smooth, clean up that edge. Remember how ragged and horrible the edge was before? Now look at that, it's nice and smooth. Gummy, yes, but at least it's smooth. Okay, Control Shift to bring this back, and then we can also turn off the solo button so we can see that works pretty well. Tucked underneath. That's the basics anyways. Turn off transparency. There we go. So let's do this. Let's save this. I think we can finish this up before the end of the live stream. So in this case, I think what I want to do is pull this part of this part in. Pull this down a little bit. And we can do, okay, so what I want to do here, let's save this. I'm going to get rid of some of this extra geometry here, same way I did with the other piece. So I'm going to do Control Shift click on this and then do split hidden. I can get rid of this now, so I'll do Control N, that just makes that disappear. So now this is its own subtool. Let's double check, make sure. We have that, we have this, and we have this. So for this subtool, we're in Dynamesh mode. So again, I'm going to use that insert. I'm holding the Alt key. You can see that little minus sign. Hold the Alt key and drag. And then move this down. Oops, let's try that again. I messed up. Okay, I messed up. Has it done gone crazy on me? Alright, we'll do, we still have this subtool, right? Yeah. And this, and this. Sorry, and something got messed up with the undo cue there. So let me try this again. Hold the Alt key and drag. W for the gizmo. Yeah, ZBrush has gone crazy. Something weird was happening. Hopefully this won't crash, but I did save a version of it just a second ago, so it should be alright. Okay, I'll get the move brush. Yeah, this has gone crazy on me. And I just have 2 copies of this. That's fine. Something happened weird with the undo cue and turned off Dynamesh, I think. So let's re-Dynamesh. Turn off the group button for now. And one more time. Hold the Alt key, drag this right here. Move it down. Scale it up. Take our move brush. Make sure it's not poking through. Turn off mask by polygroup for a second. And control drag once to clear the mask, and then again to Dynamesh. And now we have what we want. Remove some of that interior geometry that we didn't need. And we have some polygroups. So I'll just control click right here to store that in history. And now we can do a Dynamesh. or sorry, ZRemesh. Keep groups, half. It's a little ugly right there, so let's. You know what it is? It's not ZBrush, it's me. My keyboard is switched to France. Let's go back to the United States, please. Thank you. Every time I was hitting Control Z, it was just creating a polygroup instead of undoing, and so that's why it was freaking out. So my keyboard settings were wrong. There we go. At least I solved that mystery. I'm gonna move this a little bit. That's probably good. Now subdivide, Control D. And I have this history state stored, so I'll go in here, do subdual. Project history. .04, project history. Let's try this down a little bit. Project history, and there we go. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up real quick. We have this part, we have this part, and we have two versions of this part. So I'll just keep this one here for now. I'm going to take a look at this. And see where we're at. Okay, so this is pretty good and decent shape now. This is in pretty good shape. This is in pretty good shape. This could be tucked under a little bit better. Pull it up. And pull this forward. Again, we could do this kind of stuff after Z-remeshing, but let's do it ahead of time, just to avoid stretching. Split hidden on this. Got 4 minutes. Let's see if we can do it. Okay. Control wants to clear the mask. Control again to Dynamesh. Oh, it's in Dynamesh. Wah, wah. again. Oh, damn it. Sorry, guys. Delete hidden. To do this trick with the insert mesh brush, you had to have Dynamesh activated. Sometimes when you do a split hidden on the subtools, it will deactivate Dynamesh. So you're going to have Dynamesh activated first, and then hold the Alt key, drag in that sphere. At least you can see how I do this 10, 15 different times because I keep messing it up. But just, whoops. Next live stream, I'll be continuing this next week, same bat time, same bat channel, Mondays at this time. I'm in France, so it starts at 11 a.m. for me in France. So check your local listings, I guess. I don't know. But same time as this week. And then if you want to see what I did last week, like I mentioned, if you go to my website, I'll show that link one more time. If you want to see how I started the model, I'll show you that. Control drag once, clear the mask. There we go. La la la. Okay. I'm going to save this, and we'll finish up the abdomen and move on to the next part, which will be the legs next week. So I'm going to save this as 8. And then, as I mentioned before, if you go to my website, which is bluepatone.com, ArtStation, or you just go www.blue. I'll just do this. Blue Patone. It's named after my first dog. That's why it's Blue Patone. This is my website. Go to CG Instruction. This is my YouTube channel, but right down here, I have an archive of my live streams. So this is last week, AntScan project. This is the one from last week. And then I have, so you don't have to dig through the ZBrush live stream archive. I have these in order. So I have entire projects from beginning to end on various different insects and arachnids and that kind of stuff. And I'll be adding more to this. I've actually been searching through all the ZBrush YouTube for my own videos, copying the links and then putting them in order and then adding them here. So, cool. I'm glad you enjoyed it. See you next week. Download an Ant, play with it, see what happens. What's the worst that could happen, right? All right.